What is good, everybody? It is Spill here, and welcome back to another NBA 2K Lab video. In this video, we'll be going over our finishing badge tier list for all builds in NBA 2K23. So to start this tier list, since we're going to cover all the bases for each playstyle in this one video, we're going to do it a little bit differently. Now, the main tier list on the screen throughout the video will be mainly for dunkers, but as I go over each badge, I'm going to give a tier ranking for each playstyle on the right side separately, and then at the end of it all, I'll show all the tier lists. Now, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's see if we can get this video to 2,000 likes. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So if you've watched our other tier list videos, we always start at the bottom and work our way up. So we're starting in the C tier here, and we have Back Down Punisher. So this badge is not great for dunk builds, as you won't be posting up much, of course, but for post scorers though, it's definitely an S tier badge to help get off those drop steps and dream shakes a little closer to the hoop. And for bigs, we have it in the A tier because it's still very useful knowing you can bully your way to the hoop, maybe draw double and kick out. So it's still very much useful. Next, we have Dream Shake, and it's not ideal for athletic dunkers or layup builds, so we have it in the C tier for those types of builds, but it can be useful for post scorers when used effectively. So for that reason, we have it in the B tier. If you work a lot out of the post and utilize these moves, this badge seems to work better than last year and triggers more stuns. We'll know more when we test this badge to see the effectiveness of the boost and the stun rate. Moving on to the Drop Stepper badge, and this is also not ideal for athletic dunkers or layup builds, so we have this badge in the C tier, but for post scorers, this badge is more in the A tier because when combined with strength and post control and your other inside finishing attributes, it can work really well and be very effective. It's in the B tier for regular bigs though, because you'll probably only feel the power of it if you have a good amount invested in your finishing. Now we have Masher, and this badge boosts layups against defenders that are smaller than you. You shouldn't need to boost layups against smaller defenders, as those already go in more, which is why we have it in the C tier, especially for dunkers. For bigs and post scorers though, we bump it up a notch just to the B tier, as it becomes a bit more useful in more situations, but it's still really not a game-changing badge. Now, we might catch some flack from you guys on this next badge, and I know some people think it's really good, but we have Pro Touch in the C tier, and it only helps metered layups and doesn't help dunks. So for that, we have it in the C tier for dunkers. But for layup builds, we bump it up to the B tier, as it can be useful, but the boost just isn't large enough to warrant a higher tier. When it comes to post scorers though, it can help a lot more on hook shots, and for that, we have it in the A tier. Moving into the B tier for dunkers, we have the Acrobat badge, and this badge was of course made more for layup builds, where it is an A tier badge, but it can be useful if you like switching up your finishes at the rim. We don't quite recommend this badge for dunkers, as there's many other useful badges that you'll want to equip, but it may not hurt to put it on to have some flexibility if you have a lot of finishing badges. Next, we have Aerial Wizard, and this is a B tier badge across the board. It's a nice to have, kind of a luxury badge. It's really not necessary though, as oops are already pretty easy and pretty consistent this year. A high dunk rating will typically be more than enough for you to finish almost every non-contact oop. A decent badge, but it's not a must-have by any means, and it really wouldn't hurt if you skipped it. This next badge is a highly popular badge this year, and that badge is Bully. You know, for dunk builds, it doesn't make much sense to have it on, as it's mainly a layup badge, so for that, we have it in the B tier. The same for post scorers, but for layup builds, we bump it into the A tier, as it becomes increasingly more effective with the more driving layup you have. And when paired with badges like Clamp Breaker and Fearless Finisher, maybe Slithery, for example, it can work very well. Now for bigs, it's a C tier badge because you'll need momentum when driving to trigger it frequently. And as a big, you don't put the ball on the floor that often, and if you do, you're probably going to get ripped, so it's maybe not the smartest idea. So for that, it's in the C tier. Moving on to Fast Twitch, and this is only for standing layups and standing dunks, and you're most likely going to be using driving dunk as a high dunking guard, but it's still useful in certain scenarios, so we have it in the B tier for dunk and layup builds. For post scorers and bigs though, this badge bumps up to the S tier, as it becomes much more useful and practical. Getting off quick standing layups and dunks as a big provides a huge benefit to taller players who primarily finish under the rim, so this is definitely an S tier badge. Then we have Giant Slayer, and this badge only works for layups, so for dunkers we have it in the B tier for the occasional change dunk attempt, and with most ball handlers being really tall anyway, Giant Slayer has definitely lost a lot of its effectiveness. If you're a small guard though on a layup build, you should definitely use it, and we have it in the S tier for those builds, but you need to factor in how often there's a player on the opposing team that's 4 inches taller contesting you. Now for bigs and post scorers, obviously it doesn't make sense to have this badge being a taller player, so we have it in the C tier. Now this next badge, Post Spin Technician, can actually be effective as a dunker in certain scenarios, so we have it in the B tier as well as for bigs, in case you were to pair a post spin blow by into a dunk or something like that. It's not very practical, but it can be useful. For layup builds, it's in the C tier, but for post scorers, it's absolutely an S tier badge, and it almost feels like you can get a blow by every time with the right attributes and a high badge level, so for that reason we have it ranked very high. Next, we have Rise Up, and standing dunks are actually really good this year, even if you're not a big, but we have it in the B tier for dunkers because it's hard to go above above this due to the frequency of usage being pretty low. But when moving to post scores, it makes more sense. You'll find yourself under the rim more often, so we have it as an A tier badge. And for bigs, we expect those builds to also have high standing dunk and be living under the rim, so we have it as an S tier badge in terms of practicality and the usage you'll be getting out of it. Now for fearless finisher, we have it in the A tier. Even though the badge was made for layups, sometimes your dunks turn into a contact layup whether you meant to or not, and fearless finisher is the best badge to bail you out in this situation. It will help convert those change dunk attempts into points, and it's an A tier badge for all builds besides layup builds where it gets moved into the S tier for obvious reasons. Now this badge only works on layups, of course, and it seems to be one of the better finishing badges for most builds. Moving to the S tier, we have limitless takeoff, and when you see this badge in action, you can really tell that it works. Now this badge is one of the more practical driving dunk badges, as it allows you to take off from further distances, but just because the badge level goes higher doesn't mean you take off from further. A better badge level just gives a higher chance to trigger limitless takeoff, so getting this badge to at least gold would be ideal, as you'll see it pop up much more frequently than the bronze and silver levels. This badge was strictly made for dunkers, so for all the other builds we have it in the C tier. Make sure to pair this with slithery to help avoid unwanted animations when you're in midair. Another badge that works really well in tandem with limitless takeoff is the posterizer badge, and this badge is pretty self-explanatory. You'll want it on any build with high dunking, of course. We have it as a B tier badge for post scores, as it can be used occasionally off post spins and drop steps, but it's not very ideal for bigs unless you have high driving dunk. Now lastly, we have slithery, and this badge feels so good and gives great animations for getting uncontested layups and dunks against defenders that are in okay defensive position. Honestly, I feel like it gives the benefit of the doubt when driving to the rim in those situations. It works great for driving layup and driving dunk builds alike, but we had to bump it down for post scorers to the B tier since it requires more driving to the hoop and not so much posting up. However, for bigs, it's still an A tier badge, as it can definitely help when slipping on the pick and roll and some other situations. It's just an overall great badge and definitely one of the best when it comes to finishing. Now I'll leave up the tier list for each playstyle for a couple seconds. You guys can pause the video if you want to check it out, but that's all we got for this finishing badge tier list video. I hope it helped you guys. If it did, leave a like and let me know in the comments down below your favorite badges and anything you might change on this list. It's been Spill, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Later.